Hello everyone. This lecture is taking place and recorded on the lands of the Gadigal and Wangal people of the Aurora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and we pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Hi, I am Melinda Upton, Chair of the Minds Count Foundation and Global Co-Chair of IP and Technology Group at DLA Piper. I welcome everyone to the Minds Count 2020 lecture. Due to the unprecedented circumstances brought on by COVID-19, this is the first time we have offered the Minds Count lecture as a virtual event. I welcome attendance across Australia, New Zealand, Asia and the UK. I thank you to everyone who has joined tonight, both near and far, to connect and continue our learning and sharing of voice on mental health in the legal profession. As a newly appointed Chair of Minds Count, I am strongly committed to continuing its vision to promote psychological workplace health and safety in the legal profession. I would like to acknowledge the work and the support of my fellow board members and friends of Minds Count, and to thank them for their contribution and their commitment. A special thank you to our colleagues Emily Capener, Stephanie Turner, Danielle Crosman and Julia Williams for all of their hard work in pulling this event together. I would also like to pay tribute to Mari and George Jepson. Tristan Jepson was a brilliant young lawyer who took his own life in 2004, and Mari and George, being the extraordinary people and parents that they are, decided to do something about it. They established the Tristan Jepson Memorial Foundation, now Minds Count, and together with Alan Cameron, former and current board members, the Minds Count Foundation is committed to making legal workplaces psychologically healthy, with the key plank being the promotion of the guidelines. From magistrates to law students, from big law to suburban practices, and from client government, we all have an important responsibility to work together to create a profession that doesn't contribute to making people unwell. We are privileged to hear from tonight's speakers, and I'm honoured to introduce them. Our guests this evening are Lucy Brogden, AM, Chair of the National Mental Health Commission, and Gus Worland, founder of Mental Health Foundation, Gotcha for Life. With over 25 years business experience and more than 10 years in organisational psychology, Lucy has worked in trusted advisory roles with some of Australia's leading CEOs, managing partners, ministers and chairs in investment banking, finance, law, health and government. If someone was going to ask me about positives in 2020, one positive would be the real reminder that expertise matters. We've been hanging off every word from chief medical officers around the country for months now, and every word, and prior to that, Shane Fitzsimmons, who came to be known as the tireless fire chief steering Australians through the bushfire disaster, and I know we will do the same when I pass the microphone to Lucy. This is a period, and this is a reminder we needed in public policy formulation. We really need people who are the experts and the critical value in having their voice heard, which is why we are fortunate to have Lucy with us today. Lucy takes an evidence-based approach to problem solving and social investment. She's displayed remarkable resilience over her career and knows how to dig deep, and nothing about the position Lucy currently holds is easy, particularly in 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to wreak havoc right around the globe. Throughout all of this turmoil, many of us have been forced to dig deep to find that grit. We've been faced with adversity and our own vulnerabilities have been exposed. The grind without an endpoint worries me personally as a leader. It's of course useful to find a silver lining in times of upheaval. It's reminding us, I think, that government really matters. How well governments perform really matters, and I hope that brings a new interest and focus on politics and the seriousness and power of the vote. Couple this with a pandemic that has fundamentally shifted lawyers' work practices through working remotely and an increased dependency on technology, we have been provided with an unprecedented opportunity to systematically shift the work-life integration and well-being experience for the profession in a way that was previously thought impossible. I am hopeful that this era of virtual work will help us diversify our workplaces. If we can take this creativity with us, maybe we can structure better career paths and more supportive working experiences for our people in the future. Facilitating our Q&A session We are very fortunate to have Gus Worland. Gus is an Australian television and radio personality and director and founder of mental health foundation Gotcha for Life. Hosting the 2016 ABC series Man Up was pivotal for Gus. The series was an exploration of modern masculinity and men's mental health issues. Following the enormous impact of men's Man Up, Gus founded Gotcha for Life with the mission to target men's mental health, with the goal of saving lives and making a significant impact in raising the mental state of boys, men, and their families. I think Gus is a great example of the power of voice and the importance of community. We will now hear from Lucy, followed by Gus as he leads the Q&A, and you will all have a chance to ask Lucy some questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to submit those questions throughout the discussion, and forgive us and Gus if we don't get to all of those questions. Following the Q&A, David Field, board member of Minds Count and Chief Legal Counsel at Canon Australia, will announce the winners of our annual awards. And our closing comments will be provided by Justice Jagot of the Federal Court and Minds Count board member. We will aim to finish promptly at 7:15. So to get this conversation started, I'll now pass to Lucy. Thank you very much for all of your attendance. Lucy?
Thank you, Melinda, and thank you all for coming online to join the lecture this evening. I hope that you can see and hear me clearly, and look forward to speaking with you. I'd also like to start this evening by acknowledging the traditional owners of the various lands that we are all sitting on right across the globe, really, this evening. I'm standing on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and particularly acknowledge for the First Nations people their deep knowledge and understanding of social and emotional well-being. It really is from them that we in the mainstream of Australia have so much to learn. As the National Mental Health Commissioner, I also like to acknowledge those of us that live with a mental illness and those that love and care for people on that journey. And I hope that you can feel supported as you travel. Again, in joining Melinda, I'd like to acknowledge the incredible work that Murray and George Jepson have done, creating the Tristan Jepson Foundation. If there's something that I've learnt from Murray over the years, it's persistence pays, and she certainly really worked very hard to get the guidelines in place, and now Minds Count is an incredible extension and maturity of that program, and so thank you to Murray and George for all your work. Also acknowledge the board of Minds Count, Melinda Upton and colleagues on the board, and thank you for the work that you continue in that regard. It is so important. Tonight is a little bit different to the traditional lectures that we have in the Tristan Jepson Memorial Lecture, insofar as we're all online. And also, this is not your sort of profound sharing of evidence and wisdom, but really I'd hope somewhat of a conversation as we reflect on what it's like to be working today and how we stay psychologically strong with the challenges that we face. I'll be talking a little bit about the National Mental Health Commission, COVID and what it's done to us psychologically, and also look at what we can do in our workplaces to really help support each other. I thought it was important to start with my credentials tonight. And my husband likes to say that he didn't marry into a family, he married into a law firm. As far as I can see on the family tree, there are lawyers. My parents, my grandfathers were both lawyers. One was the first country solicitor to be a president of the Law Society. My great uncle was, I'm told, the youngest QC appointed in New South Wales and the youngest Supreme Court judge. My brothers, cousins, uncles, lawyers as far as you can see. So I guess in some respects, while I'm not qualified as a lawyer, I like to think I'm genetically somewhat of a lawyer, but I'm also the black sheep of the family. And I guess it's not often that you describe someone with a career in banking and finance and psychology as the black sheep of the family, but that's often how I used to feel at family dinners and functions where people would be sharing their knowledge of case law, etc. I did do a couple of courses through the SAB, constitutional law, contracts and torts, but that was enough for me. So I guess what I wanted to start on was the work of the Commission and part of what drives the work that I do in that regard. And my academic work to date has been on mood disorder in lawyers, and I would share that with you, but John, my husband, shared that in the 2013 lecture. And so tonight, rather than having Brogden citing Brogden, I thought I would pick up some new material. And I guess one of the things that I realised probably much later in my working life than I'm probably proud to admit was that in addition to the knowledge, the skills and abilities that we need to do whatever job it is that we're doing, we need to pick up an underlying philosophy to help inform the direction of the work. And so it was doing my research into lawyers, law, jurisprudence, etc., that I came across the Justinian principles, which will probably not be new to the audience, but they were somewhat new to me. And to just take you back very briefly, about 1500 years ago, the Emperor Justinian called together a colloquia of the minds to make sense of Christianity and the other religions in his vast empire, the teachings of the philosophers and the civil codes, and to distill them down into something workable and accessible to all. And one of those principles was Salus Populi Suprema Lex, the well-being of the people is to be the highest law. And this really spoke to me. And I thought that, you know, in the policy work that we do, if you start with something like that and ask yourself, is the work that I'm doing protecting, promoting, or enhancing the well-being of the people, then that's a great beacon into the guide you in the way you're shaping the work that you do. And so it's with that philosophy that I joined the National Mental Health Commission, and we were established in 2012. We're an executive agency of government. Our CEO reports to the Commonwealth Minister for Health, Greg Hunt, at the moment, and he's ridiculously busy, as are all our politicians across the country. There are 11 commissioners providing advice to the Commission and to government on a range of issues, and we come from a variety of backgrounds. And it is with pride that I am not only a commissioner, but chair the Commission in my capacity as a carer. I do have a master's in organisational psychology, but I was appointed as a carer. I love and care for my husband, who lives with depression and suicidal ideation. When he's well, he's outstandingly well. But when he's not well, he needs a lot of love and support, and we're all there for him. My fellow commissioners are carers, consumers, psychiatrists, psychologists, economists. We have a young person, we have people working out in the community, at the coalface, in social services. So we bring together a range of expertise to inform the work that we do. And that work is centred on monitoring and reporting the mental health and suicide prevention system across the country, as vast as that is and as variable as that is. We provide advice to government as requested, and we are very much a catalyst for change and working on the roadmap for 2030. We've been working heavily involved in the pandemic response, and before that the bushfire response, and working with the Productivity Commission and waiting with anticipation, as many are, for the release of that report. The Commission works with its own philosophy of the Contributing Life framework, and I think it's important that people take a moment to just reflect on that philosophy. We really believe that all Australians should be thriving, not just surviving, that we all have access to effective support, care and treatment, that we have something meaningful to do each day and something to look forward to, that we have connections with family, friends, culture and community, and feel safe, stable and secure. And it's through these lenses that we look at the monitoring and reporting that we do. Are we able to deliver these things for Australia where they live? How do we improve service, for example, to rural and remote communities? And so it's a very a framework that is based on the social determinants of health, which I'll speak about a little bit more in a moment. In 2014, the government came to us at the Commission and asked us to look at how we might reform the mental health system, and those of you that have worked on government projects would appreciate that at that time it was look at reform but with no new money. But we did that and we rose to the challenge. And one of the things we recommended was a person-centred model of care. Now, if you went to the health sector, it might seem strange that a novel recommendation was to put the person at the centre of a model of care, but please trust me, this was quite novel. And I show this not to just talk about the person-centred model of care, but to also show you that once we get past our friends, families and carers, it's our schools, it's our churches, it's our community groups and our workplaces that are critical to both prevention and recovery. And we all have that role to play. We spend the majority of our waking out lives at work. And so it's important that our workplace is psychologically safe, that is focused on prevention and supporting recovery. We do the work that we do, not just through a medical model, but through a model that looks at the social determinants of health. And this image is taken from the Lancet Commission work of a couple of years ago. And it takes the Sustainable Development Goals, which are an articulation of the social determinants, and really maps those across what it means to be mentally healthy. And we say that there is no health without mental health. You're only halfway there if you're struggling with your mental health issues. And there are a few of those Sustainable Development Goals that are relevant and pertinent to the work of lawyers and the legal profession, particularly if we look at the economic goal around number 8 and having decent work. I think there's opportunities for us to look there. And if we look at things like sustainable, the goal number 16 around having strong institutions, the law has a proud heritage of really protecting and building and designing strong institutions. And this is critical to good functioning in society, but it's also critical to well-being of people living in those societies. So much like you, our work was continuing. We were implementing these policies and strategies, looking to the future and trying to work out what we did. We had the usual end of the year in 2019 where everybody panicked to get everything done by the 31st of January because we somehow feel like the world ends then and you need to start again. And then we had 2020. And I thought we would just look at the start of 2020 and take ourselves back to this year that seems to be never ending. And on the 12th of January 2020, the National Mental Health Commission was standing alongside government to announce a package of reform to support those communities right across the country impacted by bushfire. And underpinning the package of support to our communities was about connection, bringing people together to help rebuild their communities and rebuild their lives. And it was all pinned on us bringing people together. That was on the 12th of January. Then if we turn our minds just to the end of January, and it was on the 31st of January that the World Health Organization declared a public health emergency. And really our worlds, our workplaces, our lives, the way we've gone about living and doing things has really been turned on its head. And it's been a never-ending year, a year of change. The word unprecedented has probably been used as much as the word unmute yourself. And we've had to come to find ways to adjust to that. And I thought I would look at asking the question, what it is that COVID-19, what does it do? We know physiologically what it does, but what does it do to us from a wellbeing perspective? And one of my colleagues in South Australia, Professor Nicholas Proctor, said that the virus uses its ability to exploit naturally occurring pathways through which humans interact with each other. And I think that's been the absolute challenge for all of us. Oh, I've hit the wrong button. Sorry, excuse me. It hijacks the things we do well. It takes advantage of our natural human instincts for human connection. So just as we were trying to encourage communities to come together, people to come together to rebuild and to be strong, we had to all retreat into our homes, even retreat out of our communities. And that has been an incredible challenge. The work of the Commission went from looking essentially at the 1 in 5 people that struggle with mental ill health to looking at the 5 in 5 Australians, and we know that the levels of anxiety across our community, that people are not feeling okay, and we've had to create that message that it's okay not to be okay, has gone up right across the board. So the collective work of the Commission and the sector really looked at ways we could help the whole population of Australia to get through this, in this together, with a series of tips that we put together. We also took liberties on the World Health Organisation's language, which was talking about social distancing as being part of the strategy for COVID-19. And we said that this didn't resonate for us. We wanted it to be physical distance with social connection. And actually, to their credit, the World Health Organisation picked up our language change and made it part of their instructions across the globe. So rather than being socially distant, we were physically distant and socially connected. And we put these tips out across the community and allowed them to be open source for people to use to really find ways that they could help themselves cope and their families cope as we got through the strategy. But I think we were all hopeful that this was going to come to an end at some point. And back when we launched these in March, we really thought, you know, June, July, things would be back to normal. People would be transitioning back to workplaces in Q3 or Q4 of this year. And then we realised that didn't happen. So we created another iteration of these tips, getting through this together, because really we're in it for the long haul. And that's what we need to do, is find ways to get through this together. And if we might just spend a moment on this slide, this is where I want to bring in some of the knowledge that I have based on my research into the legal profession, and bring out 2 particular tips in here that I think are really important. One of them is the one around, it's better not to bottle up your feelings. Take steps to change your drinking habits. What my research shows and others shows is that sadly the legal profession does have an issue when it comes to alcohol consumption and alcohol use. It does rate up there quite highly as a workforce. And so I would say to you tonight, please take a moment to reflect on your drinking habits at the moment. And if you do need some help, please know there's help out there. And just take that, put that hand out and think about what it is that you might need to change when it comes to drinking habits. The other tip on this slide that I'd like people to reflect on is that financial stress is real stress. And this at the moment is not discriminating. It is going right across our communities, where people are feeling and experiencing a range of different stresses when it comes to finance. People might be out of work, they might be on reduced hours, their workplace might have reduced salary levels and income levels. And this stress is very real. And what we know is that it can be a real tipping point for people if they can't get some management around the stressors and the stress itself. So please reach out, speak to an accountant, speak to a financial advisor, or speak to financial counsellors. The Commonwealth is funding an increase in resources available to financial counsellors, and they are there to help you. So please don't feel that you're alone, and reach out for that support when and where you can. So we've covered a bit around the Commission. I've talked to you a little bit about COVID to paint a picture there, and talked about some of the stresses, and this is all very general. But when we bring it down to our workplace, which is what we're talking about tonight in creating mentally healthy workplaces, one of the early initiatives of the National Mental Health Commission was to create the Mentally Healthy Workplace Alliance. And this organisation brings together a group of not likely bedfellows or boardroom table fellows, in the sense that the Alliance is comprised of the Australian Council of Trade Unions, the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Business Council of Australia, Australian Industry Group, the Council for Small Business, and I think I've said the BCA, plus groups like Safe Work, Comcare, the Australian Psychological Society, the Black Dog Institute, Beyond Blue, Superfriend and others, to really sit down and work out what it is that we need to do to create mentally healthy workplaces. Going beyond psychological safety and compliance, what do we need to do for those workplaces? And I would like to think that those of you online tonight and listening to this lecture realise that creating a mentally healthy workplace is something we need to do because it's the right thing to do. But from time to time, I still encounter people that are not so sure about that. So I just wanted to talk about the fact that not only is the human cost very high, but our colleagues over at the Productivity Commission estimate that the economic cost is between $13 and $17 billion per year. And if I put my former finance hat on and look at those numbers, I see the incredible opportunity costs that we've foregone in spending money in this way when we know that actually mental ill health is preventable. It's something that we can all collectively prevent. And if we can't prevent it, then we can treat it and get in early and allow the majority of people to make a full recovery. So that all sounds very lovely, but people then say, well, that's great. I understand that I have to do something, but what is it that I need to be doing? Working with our colleagues at the University of New South Wales and the Black Dog Institute, we commissioned a literature review a few years ago, which still holds true today and underpins the work that we do. And you won't see on this slide anything about yoga, fruit bowls, or mindfulness training. They are all very valuable resources and tools and strategies in and of themselves, but they are not where you start, and they are not the underpinning of what we need to do to create mentally healthy workplaces. So I just want to dwell on this slide a little bit and talk about a few of the elements that we need to implement if we are going to create that mentally healthy workplace focused on psychological safety. One of those things is to look at smarter job and work design. So that means taking some time to look at the cognitive aspects of the job, the physical aspects of the job, the psychosocial aspects of the job, and really thinking about how we best structure our roles and our teams for the safety of people, the well-being of people that are in our organisation. And there are free tools out there for you to do this if it's something that you haven't done. And I know there are a number of firms really doing some quite innovative work in this space, and they're to be commended for that. But the upside is really strong. We need to be promoting and facilitating early help seeking and building positive and safe cultures. And how might you test for that? And one test I've proposed to people is to stop and think about your own team and your own organisation. Have people felt safe enough to disclose to you an issue that they're struggling with their mental health, with their well-being outside of work? And what kind of reception would they get if they did disclose? Because it's a red flag, I think, in most teams, given we know the burden of disease, if people aren't feeling safe to disclose what's going on for them. We also know that the reality from the regulators that look at workplace health and safety across various guises, whether it's through Safe Work or the Fair Work Commission or others, that you can have the most beautiful policy documents on your intranet, but actually these agencies will come into your organisation and ask your employees, what's it really like to work here? And I think that's a question we should continually ask ourselves as team leaders and managers. If the regulator came in and asked, what's it really like to work here, what would our people say? If we look at number 4 around enhancing personal and organisational resilience, people that have heard me speak before will know that I really don't like the term resilience in the workplace context. And I know that that's a slightly controversial comment to make to this audience, but I'll explain to you why. I think there are roles where we need to prepare people for the trauma, for the difficulties that they might encounter in their workplace. Frontline workers, for example, people working in our courts, people working in some aspects of the law where there is vicarious trauma. And I've got to say, there's been incredible work done in both the courts and through DPPs and others to work on vicarious trauma. But again, I would pose a question to you. If you are asking your organisation to invest in resilience training, are you asking your employees to overcome toxic aspects of your workplace, or are you really trying to give them some skills and capacity for the role? And often when we go into organisations, we see that it's overcoming toxic aspects of the workplace rather than the skills they need for the role. We need to support people's recovery, and this is best done by building our mental health literacy. And we know across Australia, doesn't matter what profession we're in, that both our line managers and our HR managers have very low levels of mental health literacy. So this is a quick win for people if you are looking at something to do around supporting recovery and really building a psychologically safe workplace, is to look at that level of literacy that your organisation has in that regard. We also need to do things that reduce stigma. And I think in Australia, we often like to pat ourselves on the back and say that we've done a great job at stigma reduction. And I've got to say at the Commission, we're not so sure whether we've done a good job at stigma reduction or we've done a good job at awareness raising. And we particularly need to work on issues around self-stigma. And what do I mean by that? So I'm sure that the majority of you listening tonight be willing to support a loved one, a friend, a colleague, if they came to you and said, I've just had this diagnosis, this is my journey, will you walk with me on it? And absolutely we would support a friend or colleague in that situation. But how willing are we to put up our hand, to get help and to accept a diagnosis? And we know that self-stigma is a huge barrier to help seeking. And there are institutional barriers to that help seeking, and institutional barriers that perpetuate the self-stigma that we have. It is still today notifiable on some insurances if you get a mental health plan. It is notifiable in some workplaces if you get a mental health plan. And we know that GPs often will say to people, think about the consequences of this. We speak to families in distress where they are worried about what the implications of having a mental health plan will be in their dealings with the justice system, if it's with family court or other areas of the justice system. And we need to really look at ways we can tackle some of that self-stigma. So we are working on strategies and the National Workplace Initiative to really equip businesses to find ways to reduce the risks associated with work in their workplaces, to actively support people experiencing mental ill health, and to promote practices that are conducive to good mental health. And there'll be more to come on that, and we are working closely with groups like Minds Count and the Corporate Mental Health Alliance to really find avenues and pathways to deliver that. But tonight, I think what you can see is the strong parallel between the national work and the intent that we all have, and how that neatly parallels to the incredible work that Minds Count has done over the years and continues to do in finding ways to show those workplaces around the law how to respond and how to proactively prevent harm. And they're both important. Looking at the 13 elements around how to do that and really equipping organisations to not just commit to the strategy, but how to implement the strategies in ways that are appropriate for their organisation, whether it's size, structure, geography, or whatever the demographics are, that these are accessible to everyone. We've traversed a lot of ground and we've done it quite quickly, but I know that there's interesting questions, and I just wanted to finish up with some tips for people. And I know that people are worried, and I take this tip protocol from our colleagues at Headspace. They call it NIP, to nip it in the bud. If you are worried about a friend, a colleague, a loved one, then this is the way to reach out to them. You might notice, and it's a bit different while we're all working remotely, but if you notice change in people, in colleagues, please talk to them about it. What we know about mood disorder is that our self-awareness is one of the first things to go. So while you might be noticing change, actually someone experiencing depression or anxiety may have lost that ability to see the change, or they'll feel the change but can't put words to it. So NIP means to notice that they're not joining in and participating in meetings the way they used to notice that they're not contributing in the same way, to notice that they're wearing the same clothes every day, to notice that they might be more irritable than usual, to inquire, to ask them about that, to ask them what might be going on for them, and then to provide. Listen to what they think they might need to help. You might want to provide strategies, but you don't need answers. You might provide a listening ear. You might provide some moral support. You might provide some other form of comfort. But it is perfectly okay to ask someone if they're not okay, and then share some of that journey and burden with them. I thought I would finish up there. I'll show a slide with some of the services that are available to people at the moment, should you need to access services. And now hand back to over to Gus so that we can have some questions and interact a bit more with each other. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Hope everyone can hear me okay. Gus Worland here, the chairman and founder of Gotcha for Life. Really enjoyed that, Lucy. Thanks. And so many questions coming through, plus a few that were sent through earlier. Before I get to those, just a bit of background on myself. I did the Man Up program on the ABC going back 4 years ago. You can still watch it on ABC iView, and they've been replaying it quite a bit, which is wonderful. And I suppose that particular, what started off as a job, being a TV host of a show, very much turned into my now life's work. I've left breakfast radio and I'm Gotcha for Life full time, and it's going to be my life's work trying to get suicide rate down to absolutely zero. Put the line in the sand. One is too many. I don't want to be that person that walks down the garden path, knocks on the door and tells anyone that someone has lost a loved one to suicide. And the experience that I have had is that everything that Lucy's talking about, I'm nodding along as I'm listening. And especially for blokes, as it started off with Gotcha for Life, for us, it was all about teaching us how to have a conversation. On Triple M radio about a month ago, we had a no talk day, no traffic, no shows, no news, just music all day. And at 6 o'clock, I hosted a national program and the boards lit up. And half the questions were, I would love to have a conversation and tell someone how I truly feel. I'd love to be open, honest and vulnerable, but I actually don't know how to do that. And I think sometimes we have to realize that it's very, very difficult for blokes in particular to actually ask for help, even though we know that there might be some help out there. It's just very, very difficult for us. We've been told for years to bury our emotions and just to get on with it. And we need to get it out there that that's not the way forward. That's got us into this situation we're in now. And it's heartbreaking to see the numbers that we have in terms of suicide and also people attempting every single day in this country. So I tip my lid to you, Lucy, tip my lid to everyone involved in here tonight. And if Gotcha for Life can help you in any way, please let us know. So let's get the ball rolling with the questions. Lucy, first up, do we need to measure and report on KPI mental health efforts?
Look, I think we do, and we've that's part of the role of the Commission generally, is to report and monitor and report on the system at the highest level. I think if we bring that down to the organisations that we're in, absolutely, and you've already got a lot of the data within your organisations to give you those indicators, whether it's around staff turnover, workers' comp claims, complaints, all sorts of indicators will give you some of those measures. Your engagement survey, if it's well structured, is a useful tool. There are many ways to look at those KPIs.
Another question here, what can we do if we notice a workmate suffering with mental health? Even if we have a supportive workplace, is it appropriate to discuss concerns with management, or will this encourage people not to disclose?
Look, my sense would be that it's better to talk to that person first. As I've said, use a technique like NIP or I notice, I imagine, I feel, whatever your approach might be. If your intent is right, generally people will open up to you. So it's about thinking about the intent that you have a conversation with someone. Have that conversation with them. But if you are still worried, then absolutely escalate that to get some more support for that person. The last thing we want is losing someone because we were too scared to act. And we also know that even if it's someone in absolute crisis, the best thing you can ask them is directly, do you intend to take your life or harm yourself? And you know what? People will answer you honestly. And a lot of those people will be incredibly relieved that someone noticed and asked and cared.
I did the accidental counsellor course only 3 months ago, and I was so surprised, Lucy, when I was told that was the question to ask straight up. And I've actually used that since, and it was exactly right. People automatically went, oh, no, I'm not that bad. And it gave us a chance to take a breath. And in one situation, he allowed me to take him to the local hospital, and we were able to help him out. But if you don't know that sort of thing, if you don't know that information, you probably would never think that was the right thing to ask.
Yes. And I think lawyers are probably a bit more wary about things like privacy, etc. I always say, bring your humanity to it. Be a caring person. Deal with anything else afterwards. But our priority is to get that person to help and to keep them alive.
Absolutely. Poor mental health is such a problem in the legal profession, which has a knock-on effect on the administration of justice. Why hasn't a separate organisation been established with the sole aim of addressing this issue, like the Victorian Doctors' Health Program?
I can't speak directly to the profession, but I think some of those issues are questions that groups like Minds Count are working on at the moment. I know the law societies and the Law Council have been looking at these issues around mental health and the law for quite a long time. So I would be putting that back to your law societies and the Law Council to address.
You mentioned that there are tools for smarter work design. Where can we find those?
Okay, so we are blessed in Australia that we have a number of great academics and centres of research excellence working on this right now. And so I would point you to places like the Centre for Transformative Work Design, headed up by Professor Sharon Parker. She's an ARC laureate in this space. And they have a framework called Thrive at Work. It's all open access with tools, tests, strategies, models that organisations can all access and follow to start that conversation.
Lucy, thanks so much for your presentation. And there's quite a few of those, Lucy. Quite separate to the ethical and moral issues, I'm interested in your thoughts, re employees' legal obligations in relation to providing a safe workplace.
So, Gus, it's really intrigues me that in 2020 I can still go into workplaces, and I would hope it's not in the law, where senior management don't realise they actually have a legal responsibility under workplace health and safety legislation to provide a workplace that's not just physically safe, but psychologically safe. And so the law is there, but part of why we are doing things like the National Workplace Initiative and working with groups like Minds Count and others is to actually help people say, that's fine, I have to create that psychologically safe workplace. How do I do it? What do I do? What does it look like? And, you know, it's one thing to put in safety barriers for physical injury, but the individual differences with all of us make psychological safety a little bit harder, but not impossible.
Lucy, I'm going to sneak a little question of my own in here since I've got the floor. I've been going out with the New South Wales Rugby League team, the old boys. Freddie Fittler goes out to the country areas with all the old boys, and of course they arrive in a town and there's a buzz and everyone's very happy. He puts them through the drills on the field, and then I sneak in a little mental health chat afterwards as the boys are taking on some water and having a stretch. And I've started using the term mental fitness rather than mental health, especially around sport and young people, because they see fitness as something that's positive, and just like their physical fitness, it's something that's a bit of a sliding scale. They can work on it and get fitter by doing exercises and, of course, going to the gym physically or using your emotional muscle and actually testing yourself in vulnerable situations for your mental fitness. Do you believe that is something that we might be able to get into what we're talking about, just to change the wording up a bit, to give it a bit more of a positive feel? Because mental health, when I talk to young people, they automatically go to the bottom of the barrel in their thought process.
Absolutely, Gus, and you're absolutely on the right track. If we could see a show of hands today, and I ask people, and I do this when I have a physical audience, how many people have mental health? Often I'll only get 60% of the room. The correct answer is 100% of us have mental health. We have varying levels, degrees of mental fitness and mental health. And what I think one of the mistakes we've made over the years is to try and pack so much into one term, both positive and negative. And so we need to create that spectrum of thinking for people so they can plot for themselves. I'm feeling pretty mentally strong at the moment, or I've moved down the spectrum and I'm not travelling as well as I was before. And then you start to know when you need to put up your hand.
Absolutely. And when I say to people, you can't just go to one workshop or see one seminar. It's just like going to the gym. you can't go once, you've got to go consistently. You need to perhaps get yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit, and that's where the improvements will come. And if we put it back to physical fitness, it might give that positive strain for us, for the youngsters, and for us oldies as well. Another question here. I have recently undertaken a mental health first aider course as part of promoting mental health awareness and supporting colleagues. Should this be something that should be encouraged across all law firms, like a first aid course?
Look, I think good on you to that person for doing the course. There are a number of courses like mental health first aid or accidental counsellor around psychological safety and wellbeing. And as I said earlier, I think across the country we need to lift our level of mental health literacy so that we can have conversations with people. That doesn't mean we need to be able to quote the DSM as some diagnostic manual, but so that we are comfortable to have conversations with friends and colleagues about their mental fitness and where they might be sitting. To feel comfortable by saying, you know, Gus, I noticed that you haven't joined us on the walk for the last couple of days. You know, I imagine there might be something going on. Is it driving lessons for your P-plater, or can you not get out from under the doona? Whatever it might be, we're all human. So to do these courses, to give us the knowledge and the confidence is essential, I think, and for my mind, a far better investment than perhaps some of the other programs that companies are investing in at the moment.
Yes, I agree. I think at the start of COVID, I think I watched about 60 episodes of The West Wing in a row, and my wife started, after the third day, started to wonder what was wrong. And I suppose that was my way of getting her to ask me how I was feeling. I just got myself in such a situation as being a bit of a beacon for blokey blokes to chat to around their mental fitness that I failed to take care of myself. And my wife was there for me, but I do worry about blokes like me who have been told for years to bury their emotions when they haven't got someone around. So we really do need to build that emotional muscle up to actually say the words to someone, even if we bumble through it with snot coming out of our nose and tears running down our eyes. Somehow get that across. It's a text or an email. Just somehow build that emotional muscle to be vulnerable, to get the help that we need.
Absolutely. But I think Jeb Bartlett and Leo McGarry have good wisdom to share with people. So I'm not, a bit of the West Wing can be helpful.
Yeah, brilliant. I am a wellbeing officer, volunteer mental health first aider. It's a privilege to work at my work. Yes, we'd all go along with that. You mentioned resilience training seemed disingenuous in the workplace context. Anecdotally, all these questions are coming in as I'm reading them. It pops down at the bottom. This has been the overwhelming feeling for any mental health training run in my workplace. How can we create, Lucy, a mentally safe workplace when people are coming from a cynical starting point? Do you have any suggestions on how we overcome this initial hurdle?
Look, the best advice I've seen for that kind of question, and I do get it quite a lot, is the work of Tony LaMontagne down in Victoria, who's done a lot of work around creating mentally healthy workplaces. And he's got a very straightforward line. He says you've got to address the negative before you can implement the positive. And I think that's actually quite true in a lot of aspects of cultural and organisational change. If your organisation is serious about it, you need to put all the cards on the table and look at what's working well and what's not working well, and be prepared to address some of that negative before you can bring in a lot of the fluffy stuff. And that's why I do say you don't see yoga and fruit bowls and mindfulness at the pointy end of this work. That's nice to have, but you need to tackle some of these more structural and fundamental issues if you're going to get it right.
As you know, Lucy, one of my best friends is Hugh Jackman, and he starts each day about a 4 out of 10, and he works his way with all the stuff that he's worked on to get himself up to a 7. And then if he can hold to 7, he is winning. The other days, of course, are magnificent, wonderful days, 10 out of 10. But when he was doing his sort of tour around Australia, he sung a song from a musical called Dear Evan Hansen, which if you haven't seen it, you must see it. It's all around mental health and mental fitness. And one of the songs is Never Worry Alone. And that's the one line that I like to say to blokes, real blokey blokes who think all this stuff is sort of, they don't like talking about it, they feel very uncomfortable. But if you never worry alone, then at least you've told someone in your life what you're going through. What do you think about having that as just the one little comment just for people to think about, to get them through stuff so they don't worry alone in their own melon?
Oh, I love it. Absolutely. You know, a problem solved is a problem halved. All these things are the aphorisms that have come through the generations. And I think sometimes we get too busy to remember the basics and to never worry alone. Absolutely. You know, everybody is worrying at the moment. It is absolutely okay not to be okay. So check in with someone, share your worry, they'll share yours, and you're on the way to recovery.
I love it when before we got shut down in COVID, we had a Tomorrow Man program at Avalon. 257 blokes turned up, and the blokes that were leaving at the end of it, they said to me, I had no idea there were so many people that were bumbling through stuff. And I said, yeah, no, we're all dysfunctional, brother. And it was like we're high-fiving that we're part of this club that haven't got all the answers, and you could throw perfect away and stuff. And I think sometimes for guys and girls, we live in this strange world where we look at everyone else's life on social media and it looks perfect. In fact, you know, 5 seconds before that photo was taken and 5 seconds after, it might be completely different. We do need to realize that it's okay, like you say, not to be okay and just to bumble through, and some days will be harder than others.
Yep, absolutely. Embrace the chaos.
Yes. How do you think we can get systematic change within organisations like the courts? It is in my workplace while not being my employer. The messages coming out of the courts are on point, but the practice is lagging well behind.
Yeah, this is really challenging, and I think part of it is just the maturity curve of any change, that you start the talk, then you have to catch up and walk the talk. I think, you know, if I didn't dye my hair, it would be grey hair, and I think there's probably enough grey hair online tonight to know that actually we should look at the words of David Morrison, and I know he gave this lecture a few years ago when he said that the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. And I know it's hard for early career people to often call things out, but really those of us that are mid and later in our careers absolutely must call out poor behaviours and poor practice. It's absolutely our obligation to do that. And I think it's really wicked when people don't. And so I would really say to people, please, for the sake of yourself and others and for your children and family members coming into a profession, be part of the positive change and call out the poor practice when you see it.
Absolutely. My organisation has commenced work on producing a mental health procedure to assist our people. Can you provide any good examples that we could look at? I think I've already said that one. Apologies. The Dyson-Houston scandal showed us that the legal profession can be a very toxic and sexist place at the very highest levels. So how can such workplaces change to be better for our mental health? I suppose that goes back to exactly what you just said. If you're allowing it to happen, if you don't put your hand up, then you're part of the problem, not the solution. Would that be right, Lucy?
Look, absolutely. And I think, you know, with going to a more general comment, we do see a number of issues, and I did touch on this in my talk. When I did my research into the legal profession in 2012, the profession came out as the highest rate, having the highest rate of alcohol consumption of any work profession. It used to be always seen as the military, and in my study and in replicated studies, it's now the legal profession, and that is not a badge of honour for a profession to have. And you are smart, talented, thoughtful people, and I think if you were going to tackle something as a profession, it would be the attitude around alcohol, and if that's addressed, then a lot of other positives will flow from that.
Lucy, one last one, even though we could literally go on all night, they're all coming through, but the last one before we throw over to Steve. If the negatives of the workplace are deeply embedded, tough deadlines, expectations to work late, etc., how can we convince the senior leadership to change the structure instead of opting for the yoga fruit bowl avenue?
Look, it's an interesting phenomenon, Gus. I think when we start in wherever our workplace is and we're early career, we often say we're never going to be like the boss. We'll be different. And yet somewhere on that journey, we become exactly like the boss. And you know what? It's just not good enough. Just because we survived a system doesn't make that system the right way to work. Mm. And what I've seen, and often in the, the law firms lose a lot of their good people into corporate because people don't want to put up with some of the pressures and structures of the law firm. I see people spinning out of larger firms into smaller firms so they can create a different workplace. But what I've also seen is the supply chain work really effectively, where some partners are getting more confident to go back to their clients and say, you know what, no, we're human beings. We're not going to meet those kind of deadlines. We're not going to be unreasonable. And one of them said, you know, I was really surprised. The client said, yeah, fine. You know, the world did not end. So I think we need to test this. But also, I see the client side pushing a bit more too, because they've got requirements on mentally healthy workplace, and they're starting to say, we won't pay for more than X. This is what we expect. So I think it's a supply and demand side, but just give it a try.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, firstly, for your lecture, and then secondly, for taking all those quick fire questions from me for the last 15 or 20 minutes or so. Really enjoyed working with you, and congratulations again on everything you're doing. And us here at Gotcha for Life, we're only a small fry, but we are ready for this battle. So we're really happy to help in any way that we can. And I'd love to throw across now to David Field, who's going to take us through the awards. And thanks everyone for listening. And thanks again, Lucy.
Thanks, Gus. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Gus, and thanks, Lucy. As Gus said, I'm going to step through the Mines Count Annual Awards. So we launched the Mines Count Annual Awards in 2019 to recognise leadership in mental wellbeing in Australian legal workplaces. There are many other award programs around the Australian legal profession, and increasingly these programs are including awards for wellbeing and mental health. But we thought it was important that we should also be playing our role in recognising and encouraging leadership in this field, as well as using the opportunity to compile a survey of best practice in the profession. There are two categories in the awards. The first is the Best Mental Wellbeing Initiative in a Legal Workplace for organisations. And the second is the Individual Leadership in Legal Mental Wellbeing Award for individuals. The criteria for the award for organisations are leadership commitment, innovation, effective implementation, staff awareness and participation, and prioritise targeting of meaningful issues. I'm delighted to say that the winning organisation this year is a smaller regional firm. Beyond it being good to have representation from outside the capital cities, it's also good to see when smaller firms with fewer resources have been able to identify the wellbeing of their teams as a clear business priority. The winning organisation's mental wellbeing program is called Mind Your Marbles, and it covers a blend of education, awareness, skills, resources, the work environment, professional development, and social connection. One of the key factors that stood out for the winning submission was the sense of shared ownership of the program. That sort of empowerment is an intervention in itself and really helps to create a healthy environment, blending shared personal accountability for your own well-being with a strong message that your organisation and your colleagues care about your and their mental well-being. The winner of the Mines Count Foundation Best Mental Wellbeing Initiative in a Legal Workplace for 2020 is Morrissey Law and Advisory, headquartered in Newcastle and with offices in Sydney, Port Macquarie and Coonabarabran. We'll arrange for an acceptance speech from Morrissey Law and Advisory to be recorded separately and included with the recording of the lecture. So congratulations to the team at Morrissey Law and Advisory. The criteria for the award for individuals are leadership, innovation, impact, and meaningful contribution. This year's winner has used her leadership position in her firm to position mental health and sustainability as the key enabler of sustainable high performance. Your people's mental well-being is not something you do despite business needs, it's something you do to help you meet your business needs. The winner has also used her position to advocate for mental health more broadly in corporate Australia. She has role modelled that inclusive leadership is a strategic capability for a law firm. Her approach to leadership of her firm has emphasised the importance of a values-driven culture and the critical importance of meaning in the workplace, the idea that people want to know that their work has a higher significance. One aspect that particularly impressed us was the emphasis on the connection between mental wellbeing and diversity, the idea that to work effectively and sustainably, everyone needs to know that they are safe, valued and respected. In this case, the winner's personal commitment to diversity extended to leading the firm's Mardi Gras float in a way that engaged both the firm's personnel, but also many clients. The winner of the 2020 Mines Count Award for individual Leadership and Legal Mental Wellbeing is Annette Kimmett, Managing Partner and Chief Executive Officer of Minter Ellison. Congratulations to Annette. So please just join me one more time in congratulating the nominees and winners of the awards for this year's Minds Count Foundation Annual Awards, and please start planning your submissions for next year's awards. Before I surrender the mic, can I please just give a plug for our next Minds Count Signatory Forum? The Signatory Forums are an opportunity for signatories to the TJMF guidelines to get together to share their experiences in implementing mental wellbeing programs in their workplaces. With thanks to the energy and organisational skills of Anna Laycock, the next forum is scheduled for Monday, 26 October to be hosted by Herbert Smith Freehills. The topic will be the contribution of alcohol to sexual assault in the legal workplace within the broader paradigm of mental health. The panel will include Danielle Kelly from Herbert Smith Freehills, Associate Professor Julia Quilter from the University of Wollongong, Caroline Cox, General Counsel at Group General Counsel at BHP, and Sex Discrimination Commissioner Kate Jenkins. So watch out for that one, and we hope to see you there. I'll now hand to Justice Jagot for the close.
I'm hoping you can hear and see me. Thanks, David, and congratulations to our 2020 winners. Minds Count focuses on facilitating best mental health practices in legal workplaces throughout the profession. Our profession rewards attention to detail, foresight, planning for all possible contingencies, and perfectionism. We should acknowledge that the flip side of all of these coins is a high incidence of anxiety and depression. Workplaces can make an invaluable contribution to improvement of mental health and the management of mental illness in our profession. More than this, workplaces have a legal and ethical responsibility to ensure they do so by adopting best practices for mental health in the workplace. It's as simple as this. Your workplace should not make you sick, physically or mentally. If you do become ill, physically or mentally, your workplace should support your recovery. We, the legal profession, still have to front up to the fact that in a workplace committed to these objectives, there is no room for endlessly excessive hours of work, consistently unreasonable work demands, bullying or harassment. The fact that an organisation such as Minds Count exists and the large turnout for tonight's lecture, albeit remotely, shows how far we've come. But those of us in the legal profession will know we still have a real distance to travel to make legal workplaces places of mental health safety and well-being. Before we go, I'd like to thank Lucy for her insights. And I'd also like to thank Gus Worland for facilitating our Q&A session. Can I thank as well David Field and Melinda Upton, as well as the volunteers who have assisted Minds Count, and of course all of the signatories to the Minds Count Workplace Wellbeing Guidelines. Without your support, Minds Count could not continue its important work of facilitating best mental health practices in the legal profession. I thank you all and bid you good night.